This is Unboxing, a segment of the show where Jessica and I discuss the more nuanced aspects and finer details within the worlds of boards and brews. There are a lot of cogs and gears that turn within both of these great passions, and we cover them here by unboxing them. Today's topic, how not to behave at the board game table according to you. With summer now in full swing, more opportunities for gaming events and gatherings are here. More opportunities for people to come together and take part in this fantastic hobby. But we're not simply just 1 to 5 players at a table during any given game. We're also 1 to 5 personalities. Unique personalities with their own unique quirks, habits, and playstyles. Sensible people will agree that a minimum level of decorum is needed for any societal gathering, including those at a board game table, to function well. A parameter of basic decency from everyone to make sure a good time is had by all. When trying to figure out what exactly lies within those parameters, it's sometimes best to figure out the most explicit things that lie beyond them first. And that's where you come in. We asked and you answered in a big way regarding the things that you believe can turn any gaming experience into a negative one. Board gaming is supposed to be a leisurely and fun activity, so hopefully we can keep it that way by shedding some light on these most mentioned grievances, even if it means a few of us have to take a much closer look in the mirror. With that said, let's dive in and unbox some of the habits, traits, and behaviors at the game table you found to be the most annoying.
First of all, thank you so much to all of you who participated in our various surveys about the most annoying traits and habits that can happen at the board game table. Obviously, we can't share every bit of feedback that we got because that would take forever, but we will be taking some notable comments and quoting them here on the show. So listen up, you might hear your own comment quoted by us. The first thing we want to cover is a couple of different people mentioned personal hygiene.
Honestly, I'm surprised only a couple of people mentioned personal hygiene as something that gets to them because, let's be real, we have been to gaming events, we have been to gaming bars and stuff. Not everyone smells too good. I don't know why, but it's really gross.
I mean, there's a lot of different reasons for various types of body odor, but if you're going to be in close proximity with someone or sitting on someone's furniture, touching their stuff, at least make an effort to not be gross. It does make people around you pretty uncomfortable. I feel like that's just general social etiquette, though, and not specific to board gaming.
Yeah, but if you're at a board game table, you're going to be sitting there for at least an hour, and you don't want some, and I'm going to be completely blunt here, you don't want some fat, disgusting slob who hasn't changed his clothes in 4 or 5 days, or that chick who doesn't like to shower more than once a week sitting next to you. You just don't want it. You can smell all their body odor, and it smells like rancid pubic hair and Cheetos. No thanks.
Speaking of Cheetos, that brings us to our next annoying habit, not respecting the physical game itself. This includes things like eating Cheetos or other dirty, greasy foods and then touching game components, bending the cards, or putting pieces in your mouth. Seth Millman said, nail biting and throwing the fingernail pieces onto the table. Parentheses, this is a true story. I was very surprised to hear that one. That is pretty gross.
It is. I was even more surprised to read a comment left by Jason Moore using the game board as a drinks coaster.
Ooh.
Like, who would do that?
That's rough.
You know, when it comes to treating people's games, I mean, we'll start with people's games first, because, I mean, you know, if you want to treat your game like absolute crap, I guess you can go ahead and do it. It's your game. But if it's somebody else's game, you definitely should respect it.
Absolutely. I mean, and even if it is your game, if you're going to eat with messy food and then touch the components with dirty fingers and then pass those components to someone else and they have to touch the same stuff that you just got greasy food all over, whether it's your game or not, that's still just kind of gross and inconsiderate.
I think as long as you have some napkins out and if you are going to eat food, I don't really have a problem personally with people eating food, but like wipe your hands. You know what you're doing, know what you're getting into, have a game plan, I guess, is what I'm trying to say.
I mean, honestly, if you're serving Cheetos at a gaming event...
Yeah, that's a you problem. That's your fault.
Right, exactly. Make sure there's napkins out, and then hopefully everyone will use them.
So the next annoying thing people talked about a lot was when players don't play within the spirit of the game. And I want to refer to something that Chad Troxel said, because I think he encapsulated this really perfectly. He called it a clever use of game mechanics abuse. People who look for loopholes in rules and essentially try to break the game so they can bypass challenges or do something really broken that goes clearly far outside the intended gameplay design.
Other examples of not playing within the spirit of the game include making random choices out of apathy or not taking your role seriously. For example, John Law said, "We played Secret Hitler last weekend and one player kept announcing his role because he thought it was funny." Generally speaking, if you understand the spirit of the game and what it's supposed to be, don't make choices that go against that just because you think you're clever or funny or really any of the above.
Well, because people are sitting down to play the game, they want to immerse themselves in the game, in the mechanics, and if you do something that cuts the game off real early because you completed this before anyone else, but you didn't really work at it, I can see how that would ruin everyone's fun.
Absolutely. The next topic is a lot of people have annoyances with how people are teaching the game to them. Things such as not including strategy in the teach or including too much strategy in the teach, the teacher of the game still playing to win, or on the opposite spectrum, helping too much during a game. So one quote on that was notable that actually had quite a few replies was Madison O. She said, "Divulging too much strategy in the teach. Tell me the rules, but let me pay attention and fail a few times to discover the strategy on my own." But there were definitely a spectrum of different opinions on that one.
There was, and I wanted to read a piece of a quote from Crystal Marie Miller, who said people who still focus on winning when they're teaching or showing a new game was the thing that annoyed her the most. It's kind of the opposite of what you were just talking about.
I don't know. I feel like it's a fine line between letting someone win or going easy on them and not going hardcore because it is their first time and they're still learning.
But there's a lot of people we saw in these threads where it's almost like I kind of think they expect the teacher to let them win. And to me, that's some participation trophy bullshit. I don't think that's the answer either. I think you need to read your table as a teacher. If they don't get it, keep the strategies, keep your play minimal. And once they do get it, then play the win because they get it and make them earn it.
I think you're right on the money about reading the table. And I think it's almost worth a discussion before you start. Like, hey, how much do you want me to help you? Because some people, they really want you to stop them and say, hey, there's a better move you could be making, or you're missing out on some opportunities here. But other people, they don't want that. They want to fail and see what happens and figure it out on their own. And it can be very frustrating when you're expecting one and you get the other. So I think communication among all parties is really key.
Now, that has to do with people being taught a game. On the other side, when teaching the game, most people complained about people not paying attention while they're trying to teach them the rules. There are some people who get really bothered when somebody says, hey, let's just learn as we go, meaning no one's going to want to play with me. A lot of asking questions before the teach is even over. So it's like, hey, I'm going to get there. Let me teach it the way I want to teach it. And just kind of overall people being bad students, as it were.
And I've noticed a lot of the frustration with those things comes from later on when those same people who weren't paying attention or who were interrupting one point to ask a question about something else or saying they want to learn as they go, they then complain because they're missing something or they didn't know they could do that or that they couldn't do this other thing. I can see how that would become very frustrating for someone who's trying to teach someone, or they're like, I did say that, or I was trying to explain that, but you didn't want to hear it. One thing I found that annoys people when they're teaching, and I'm guilty of this one for sure, some people mentioned is, I like to call it backseat teaching. Here, this quote from Luke Hector explains it pretty well. Butting in to explain the rules when the teacher is explaining them, as if they somehow think that the teacher needs an assistant all of a sudden, and they just add confusion by having two separate styles of teaching clash. Not to mention, they always seem keen to teach things like strategy tips or tactics.
And this is why I don't teach games to people, Jess.
I mean, it's totally fair. I have a problem with wanting to add things that I feel like you missed, and probably you were going to get there, but I should stop that.
Well, we talked about reading a room before, and I can tell you, not just you, I've seen other people do this, and I've watched everybody else in the room while it was happening. It just causes confusion. And then all of a sudden somebody's going, actually, let me just see the rule book. And then you got to wait for them to read the rule book, or maybe they start teaching the game and it just gets chaotic, and you don't want that.
I don't think that people shouldn't be allowed to look at the rule book. I think it's definitely helpful, and some people do need to see that visual in order to kind of grasp it and make it click in their mind.
I would say wait until the person's done, though. Otherwise, you're just messing up the flow and the rhythm.
Yeah, that's definitely a good point. Another notable complaint that a lot of people mention that actually surprised me is side chatter. Things like talking at the table about non-game related topics, talking with people who are not participating in the game. These sorts of things tend to really bother certain people. And I can understand how when you spend a lot of time and it becomes an interruption that disrupts the flow of the game, that can be really frustrating. But personally, I think gaming is a social activity. So to say strictly the only conversation allowed is supposed to be game related, or one person said, you can't talk while I'm trying to come up with a strategy because it's distracting. Well, that just doesn't seem like a lot of fun when it's not your turn. And yes, you should be paying attention, but I think you can also have a little bit of conversation.
I would say it entirely depends on the game you're playing and the people you're playing with. I'll go back to this again. We've probably said it 2 or 3 times. Discuss the type of game night you want to have. Discuss it with people beforehand, and then you don't run into the issue. But let me ask you, either way, though, like whether you're trying to have a more serious game or a not more serious game, I think some chatter is okay. I mean, we saw one or two comments where it's like, don't talk about anything while I'm taking my turn. And, my response is kind of like, well, go fuck yourself. The world doesn't revolve around you if you're going to be that way.
I would agree with that. I would say the only time when you should expect silence during a game is if the spirit of the game demands it. But if it's not a game that demands it, I don't see any reason why you should ban it from your table.
Yeah, don't be a total asshole. But Jessica, speaking of assholes, the thing that seemed to bother people the most or almost the most was cell phone use.
Yes, people were very passionate about cell phone use. And there were a couple of people who defended it under certain circumstances, but a shocking number of people say they don't want cell phones on at the table at all.
Well, I can see where they're coming from because people are glued to these cell phones of theirs. There's never a moment, it seems, when someone's not staring at their phone. It's almost like anytime there's downtime, under any circumstances whatsoever, the phone comes out. And then people get caught in that doom scrolling, or they're texting other people, or they're watching videos, and now they're taken out of the game.
Well, I think if you're watching a video and it's out loud, that's kind of rude. It's distracting. It's like turning on the TV, which was another thing some people mentioned. But if you're answering a text message, like from your babysitter or something, checking on your kids, dealing with the situation, I don't really feel like that's a huge deal, especially if it's not a moment where you're actively playing and you're not missing out on any important details.
I think it's an obvious thing, right? Like if the person's going and checking on the babysitter, no one's complaining about that. I think people are complaining more about when people are just distracted on their phone.
Yeah, I think that when it becomes such a distraction that it's adding time to the game, this actually kind of brings us into our next point. And the side chatter can be this too. If your side chatter or your phone use is to the point where you're only paying attention when it's your turn, that can be a problem. And I think that this comment from Fran MW sums it up really well. She said, people on their phones who then use their turn to ask what others have done, plan what they want to do, and then do it. In games where they could just watch what others have done and plan their turn in advance. It adds so much time.
This is probably my number one pet peeve personally. People not paying attention until it's their turn and then making everyone else sit there while they figure things out. We have mentioned before, our attention span for games doesn't really go past 2 hours. And so when somebody sucks up 15 minutes trying to figure out what they want to do, oh yeah, nothing drives me crazier.
Yes, I think taking time when it's not necessary is just so disrespectful to the people around you, too. Sometimes people have to be home at a certain time or they're getting tired because it's late. Or, just in general, respect other people's time. And if you had the opportunity to watch what was going on and plan your turn before it became your turn, you should use that and not be an asshole and disrupt it for everyone else. People don't want to wait 20 minutes for you to take your one turn. Which brings us to our final point of annoyance, generally just having a bad attitude. Examples of this being a sore loser or a smug winner, checking out in the middle of the game because you don't think you're doing well, complaining the whole time because it's not the game you wanted to play or because it's not going the way you want it to be going. These things people just generally don't enjoy, which makes a lot of sense.
One of our longtime listeners, Mr. Lenny Quint, has an interesting story regarding this. If you haven't seen his YouTube channel, Shogunstein, by the way, you should definitely check it out. His videos are very interesting, informative, and they look at games from a really cool perspective. Anyway, Lenny says, I hate when playing a game when people start talking about a different game that has the same mechanics as the current game, but is better. Worst thing I ever saw while playing a game, someone didn't like the game currently being played, so they started to punch out pieces for a new game they brought and were showing the game to people as we were playing the other game. Yeah, that's a dick move.
That is very rude. Can you imagine if you're at a movie night and you just pop open your laptop and you're like, hey guys, I'm going to open Netflix because I want to watch something different.
Yeah. That is just totally uncool. But that's the bad attitude thing people were talking about. That just happened to be the most interesting story out of it. But people had a lot of stories like that. Honestly, there's really a lot here when it comes to bad attitudes at the table. I think this would probably be better served as its own unboxing. And there's a few things that I think would be better served as its own unboxing that we will definitely do in the future. For now, I'll just say, you know what a bad attitude looks like. You know what it feels like, more importantly, at a table. Avoid it. Don't be that person.
That's all we have for today. Thanks again for listening. If you have a board game habit that really bothers you, that really grinds your gears, that really chaps your chode, then let us know in the comments. Keep the conversation going.
The visuals now are just fucking unreal.
Anyway, keep the conversation going. Throw it in the comments. We'd love to hear what you think.
And apparently grab some lotion for the most sensitive parts of your undercarriage. I don't want to know if it's chapped, that's for sure, but I do want to know what you think about the podcast, which is probably a really bad time to mention that. But regardless of my wife, 5-star reviews are still the only acceptable number of stars. Next week, Jessica, we got something huge for the 2 people who will still be listening after today. We've never done this before, but we are going to be doing a big summertime special that we didn't announce until right now because we didn't know we were doing it next week.
So, surprise!
Yeah, we usually cover 1 game and drink at a time. We're still going to have 1 drink, but we are going to be covering a ton of games that bring out summertime vibes. Summertime's basically here, Jess, in what, a couple weeks from now?
Yeah, so we're bringing it in with a big old bang of games.
Exactly. So join us next week and let's kick off the summer season right with a bunch of thematically sound and appropriate games. Until next time, I've been Bryce, that's been Jessica. We are the Game and Drink Connoisseurs, and we will see you next time.